Commander Zekai pressed his face against the small window of the emergency pod and watched his ship die. The Starlight Grace spun slowly through the black emptiness of space, its hull cracked open like a broken egg. Metal pieces drifted away from the main body, glittering in the distant starlight like deadly snowflakes. 3 weeks ago, it had been the pride of the Valanian research fleet. Now it was just expensive garbage floating in the void. The cascade failure had happened so fast. One moment they were running routine scans of an asteroid field in the outer rim territories, and the next moment alarms were screaming throughout the ship. The quantum drive had overloaded, sending energy feedback through every system on board. Emergency bulkheads slammed shut, cutting off sections of the ship. The artificial gravity failed, sending crew members and equipment flying in all directions. Zekai had managed to get 11 of his 12 crew members into escape pods before the main hull breach occurred. He had watched helplessly as the pods launched automatically, their tiny engines carrying them away from the dying ship. For 2 days he had maintained radio contact with the other survivors. Then, one by one, their signals had faded into silence. Some pods had been hit by debris from the exploding ship. Others had simply drifted too far away for their weak transmitters to reach him. Commander Zekai was now alone, floating in a metal box no larger than a closet, watching his breath fog up the tiny porthole. The emergency beacon had stopped working after 48 hours. The backup power cell had failed, taking with it any hope of rescue. Even if the distress signal had reached Valanian space, it would take the rescue fleet at least a month to reach this remote sector. Zekai checked his life support display. For the 100th time today, 18 hours of oxygen remained, maybe 20 if he activated hibernation mode. He had already made peace with death. The Valanian military had prepared him for this possibility during his academy training. Space was vast and dangerous, and sometimes ships simply disappeared without a trace. His family would receive his service medals and a letter of commendation. His research notes were backed up on the main computer network, so his work on quantum mechanics would survive even if he did not. Zekai closed his eyes and tried to meditate, as his ancestors had taught him. The Valanian people had been exploring space for over 1,000 years, and they had learned to accept the risks that came with traveling between the stars. Death was simply another journey, another frontier to cross. He should feel honored to join the countless explorers who had given their lives to expand the boundaries of knowledge. But he did not feel honored. He felt afraid and very, very alone. The proximity alarm startled him out of his meditation. Zekai opened his eyes and stared at the small display screen built into the pod's control panel. Something was approaching through the debris field. Something big. At first, he thought it might be a Valanian rescue ship arriving early. But as the shape grew larger on his sensors, Zekai realized this vessel was completely unknown to him. It was huge, easily 3 times the size of the Starlight Grace, but its design was unlike anything in the galactic databases. The hull was dark gray and covered with patches and repairs, as if the ship had seen many battles or accidents. Strange symbols were painted along its sides in bright yellow and red colors. Most surprising of all, the ship was using primitive fusion drives instead of quantum propulsion. Zekai could see the blue glow of the exhaust trails as the vessel maneuvered through the floating wreckage. This was the kind of technology most species had abandoned centuries ago. Who still built ships like this? The unknown vessel approached slowly and carefully, avoiding the larger pieces of debris. Its movements were precise and deliberate, showing skill and experience despite the crude propulsion system. Whoever was piloting this ship knew what they were doing. Zekai activated his pod's emergency transmitter and began broadcasting on all frequencies. He sent out basic mathematical sequences first, then simple pictographs showing peaceful intentions. These were standard first contact protocols designed to communicate with any intelligent species, regardless of their technology level or language. For several minutes, there was no response. The alien ship continued its approach, moving in a slow spiral pattern around the debris field. Then Zekai's communication system crackled to life with an answering signal. The response was crude but unmistakably intelligent. Mathematical progressions, followed by simple drawings that seemed to indicate greeting and assistance. Hope flared in Zekai's chest for the first time in weeks. These beings, whoever they were, appeared to be friendly. More importantly, they were here, in this empty corner of space where no one should have been. How had they found him? Why had they come to this remote sector? As the alien vessel drew closer, Zekai could make out more details of its construction. The hull was built from several different types of metal, welded together in patterns that suggested multiple repairs and modifications over many years. Weapon ports were visible along the sides, but they remained closed and inactive. This was clearly a working ship, possibly a merchant vessel or explorer, rather than a military craft. The communications continued, with both sides exchanging increasingly complex mathematical concepts and pictographs. The aliens seemed remarkably quick to understand new information, adapting their responses and building on previous exchanges. Their technology might be primitive, but their intelligence was clearly sophisticated. A new sound filled the pod as something attached to its outer hull with a solid thunk. Through the porthole, Zekai could see a flexible tube extending from the alien ship to his pod. They were attempting a direct docking, preparing to bring him aboard their vessel. This was either a rescue or a capture, and he would not know, which until it was too late to matter. Zekai checked his sidearm, a small energy pistol that was standard equipment in all escape pods. The weapon had enough charge for perhaps 10 shots, hardly enough to fight off an entire alien crew. If these beings meant him harm, resistance would be futile. If they meant to help him, the weapon would be unnecessary. Either way, he was completely at their mercy. The docking tube sealed against his pod with a hiss of equalizing atmosphere. Lights appeared along its length, indicating a secure connection. Through the tube's transparent walls, Zekai could see figures moving toward him. They were roughly humanoid in shape, walking upright on 2 legs, but their specific features were hidden by some kind of protective suits. One of the figures reached the pod's airlock and began operating the manual override controls. The technique was crude but effective, showing that these beings understood basic mechanical systems even if they could not read Valanian script. Within minutes, the inner door cycled open. The first alien to enter the pod was smaller than Zekai had expected, standing roughly 6 feet tall compared to his own 7-foot frame. The being wore a bulky environmental suit with a clear faceplate, revealing features that were surprisingly familiar. 2 eyes, a nose, a mouth arranged in proportions that seemed almost normal. The alien's skin was a pale pink color and short. Brown hair was visible beneath the helmet. The being extended one gloved hand toward Zekai in what appeared to be a gesture of greeting or peace. Through the suit's communication system, a voice spoke in a language Zekai did not recognize, but the tone was warm and reassuring. Commander Zekai took the offered hand and allowed himself to be led through the docking tube toward whatever fate awaited him aboard the alien vessel. For the first time in 3 weeks, he was no longer alone in the void. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of the cargo freighter New Horizon and watched the strange wreckage drift past his main view screen. His ship had been carrying medical supplies to the colony worlds when they stumbled across the debris field. The twisted metal fragments looked like they had once been part of a large spacecraft, but the design was completely foreign to anything in their computer databases. "Captain, I'm picking up a faint life sign," called Navigation Officer Lisa Parks from her station near the front of the bridge. Her fingers danced across the control panel as she fine-tuned the sensors. "There's someone alive out there in a small pod, but their life support is failing fast." Chief Engineer Pete Sullivan looked up from his diagnostic console, his weathered face creased with concern. "Those readings don't make sense, Captain. The power signature is unlike anything I've ever seen before. The whole design is completely alien to our technology." Morrison nodded grimly as he studied the sensor data on his command screen. The New Horizon was not a military vessel or an exploration ship. It was just a converted merchant freighter with a crew of 38 people, hauling cargo between the outer colonies. They were not equipped for first contact situations or alien rescue operations, but they could not simply leave someone to die in the empty void of space. "Bring us alongside that pod, Lisa," Morrison ordered. "Pete, Get a boarding tube ready for emergency docking. And someone wake up Doc Martinez and tell her to prepare the medical bay for a possible alien patient. The bridge crew moved into action with practiced efficiency. Lisa Parks engaged the maneuvering thrusters and began the delicate process of matching velocity with the drifting escape pod. Pete Sullivan hurried toward the cargo bay to prepare the docking equipment. Communications officer Amy Chen started monitoring all radio frequencies for any sign of alien transmissions. "Captain, I'm getting something," Amy reported as her equipment picked up a series of mathematical signals. It's basic arithmetic sequences, followed by what look like simple drawings. Someone in that pod is trying to communicate with us. Morrison leaned over Amy's shoulder to study the incoming transmission on her screen. The mathematical progressions were clearly intelligent in origin, starting with simple addition and moving on to more complex equations. The drawings were crude but recognizable as attempts at peaceful communication. Whoever was in that pod was trying to establish contact using universal concepts that any intelligent species should understand. "Send a response," Morrison instructed. "Use the same format they're using. Mathematical sequences first, then simple pictures showing that we want to help." As Amy worked on the reply, Morrison activated the ship's internal communication system. "Attention all crew, this is the captain speaking. We are attempting to rescue a survivor from an unknown alien spacecraft. This will be humanity's first contact with a non-human intelligence. I want everyone to remain calm and professional. Follow all safety protocols and treat our guest with respect and courtesy." The docking procedure took nearly an hour to complete. The alien pod was small and oddly shaped, nothing like human escape capsules. Its hull was made from some kind of blue-green metal that seemed to shimmer under the New Horizons' external lights. Strange symbols were etched into its surface, and several devices that might have been sensors or communication arrays protruded from various points. Pete Sullivan managed to attach a flexible boarding tube to the pod's airlock, despite the unfamiliar design. The atmosphere readings showed that the air inside was breathable by human standards, though it contained a higher concentration of nitrogen than Earth normal. Dr. Elena Martinez stood ready with her medical equipment, prepared to treat whatever kind of being they might encounter. Morrison suited up in a standard environmental suit and entered the boarding tube, accompanied by Chief Security Officer Danny Walsh and medical technician Carol Brown. They moved slowly through the transparent tunnel, unsure of what they might find on the other side. The alien pod's airlock was a complex mechanism with controls that bore no resemblance to human technology. But Pete Sullivan had studied the design through the tube's cameras, and he guided Morrison through the override sequence using hand signals. After several tense minutes, the inner door finally cycled open. The being inside the pod was tall and thin, standing nearly 7 feet in height. His skin was a pale blue color that seemed to shift and shimmer in the light. His limbs were longer and more delicate than human proportions, and his large dark eyes held an intelligence that was immediately recognizable. He wore a form-fitting uniform of some silver material, and various devices were attached to his belt. Morrison slowly removed his helmet and extended his hand in the universal human gesture of greeting. "Welcome aboard the New Horizon," he said, even though he knew the alien could not understand his words. "I'm Captain Jake Morrison. We're here to help." The alien studied Morrison's face for a long moment, then reached out and grasped his hand, with surprising gentleness. His skin felt cool and smooth, and his grip was firm but not threatening. He spoke in a musical language that sounded almost like singing, his voice carrying tones that seemed to express gratitude and relief. Carol Brown stepped forward with her medical scanner, moving slowly and keeping her hands visible. The alien watched her carefully, but did not resist as she took readings of his vital signs. Dr. Martinez would need this information to adjust the ship's life support systems for their unexpected guest. "His physiology is remarkably similar to ours," Carol reported through her helmet radio. "Different atmospheric requirements and probably adapted for lower gravity, but definitely within the range we can accommodate. Heart rate is elevated but stable. He appears to be in good health despite his ordeal." The transfer to the New Horizon took another 30 minutes. The alien moved carefully through the boarding tube, clearly uncomfortable with the human gravity but adapting quickly. Morrison was impressed by how rapidly the being adjusted to the new environment. Most humans would have had difficulty walking, normally under such conditions. Dr. Martinez was waiting in the medical bay when they arrived. She had already begun adjusting the atmospheric controls to better suit their guests' needs. The alien submitted to her examination with patient cooperation, even though the medical instruments were clearly unfamiliar to him. "Fascinating, Doctor," Martinez murmured as she studied her readings. "His internal organs are arranged differently than ours, but they serve the same basic functions. His blood chemistry shows he evolved on a world with different atmospheric composition. Probably higher nitrogen content and lower oxygen levels. I can easily modify our life support to keep him comfortable." Morrison activated a wall-mounted computer terminal and called up the ship's translation software. It was primitive compared to what the military used, but it might be able to establish basic communication with enough time and data. Amy Chen had already begun uploading the mathematical exchanges from their first contact attempts. The alien watched the computer screen with obvious interest as Amy worked. When she displayed simple mathematical concepts, he responded by touching the screen and indicating his understanding. His learning curve was remarkably fast, and within an hour, they had established a basic symbol system for common concepts. Morrison brought the alien to his private quarters, which had been hastily modified with different atmospheric settings. He offered food and water, both of which their guest accepted after careful examination. The alien's eating habits were similar to humans, though he seemed to prefer the sweeter foods from Morrison's emergency rations. Over the next few hours, the communication system gradually improved. The alien proved to have an exceptional talent for languages, and he seemed as eager to learn about humans as they were to learn about him. Through simple drawings and basic mathematical concepts, they began to exchange information about their respective species. The alien drew pictures showing a large spacecraft with multiple crew members, followed by images of an explosion and escape pods scattering in different directions. Morrison understood that this being was the survivor of some kind of disaster, possibly the sole remaining member of his crew. The wreckage they had found was apparently all that remained of his ship. Morrison showed their guest images of Earth and the human colonies, trying to explain humanity's relatively recent expansion into space. The alien seemed surprised by how quickly humans had spread across multiple star systems, and he spent considerable time studying the pictures of human cities and spacecraft. As the day progressed, Morrison began to realize that this first contact might be more significant than just rescuing a stranded traveler. The alien's technology was clearly more advanced than humanity's, despite his ship's destruction. His rapid learning ability and obvious intelligence suggested that his people were sophisticated and potentially powerful. This meeting could be the beginning of a new chapter in human history. That evening, as Morrison sat in his quarters with their alien guest, he wondered what the future might hold. The being seemed peaceful and grateful for their help, but Morrison knew that first impressions could be deceiving. Tomorrow they would reach Haven's Gate Colony, where xenobiologists and linguists could begin proper contact procedures. 3 days had passed since the rescue, and the New Horizon continued its journey toward Haven's Gate Colony. Commander Zekhai spent most of his time in the ship's small library, working with Communications Officer Amy Chen to build a better translation system between their two languages. The process was slow but steady, and both species were learning more about each other with every conversation. Zekhai had been amazed to discover that humans were newcomers to space travel. Their first faster-than-light voyage had happened only 60 years ago, which seemed impossibly recent to someone whose people had been exploring the galaxy for over 1,000 years. Most species took centuries to develop stable interstellar colonies, but humans had somehow managed to establish settlements on dozens of worlds in just a few decades. "Your people are very fast learners," Zekhai told Captain Morrison during one of their evening meetings in the captain's quarters. His English was still rough, but it improved every day as he absorbed new vocabulary and grammar rules. "Most species move slowly when they go to new worlds. Humans move very quickly." Morrison poured synthetic coffee for both of them, having discovered that Zekhai enjoyed the bitter taste despite his people's preference for sweeter foods. "We're stubborn, I suppose. When we decide we want something, we don't give up easily. My grandfather used to say that humans are too dumb to know when something is impossible. It is more than stubbornness, Zekai replied, choosing his words carefully. I have watched your crew for 3 days now. They work together without conflict. They help each other solve problems. Your engineer Sullivan spent 2 hours yesterday trying to repair my damaged translator, even though it has no value to him. Personally, the Valanian paused to sip his coffee, still adjusting to the strong flavor. Your medical officer Martinez checks on my health every day, but she also asks about my home world and my family. She shows genuine concern for my well-being beyond her professional duties. This behavior is unusual. Morrison leaned back in his chair, curious about the alien's perspective. Unusual how? Don't other species help each other? They do, but usually within strict social boundaries, Zekai explained. Most species help their own family groups, their own communities, their own planets. They follow rules and protocols that define who deserves assistance and who does not. But humans seem to help anyone who needs it, regardless of whether they know them or not. Zekai gestured toward the door, indicating the crew working beyond. Your navigator Park shared her personal food rations with me when she learned I preferred sweet things. Your security officer Walsh taught me how to use your exercise equipment, though I am clearly not a threat to anyone. These actions serve no logical purpose for them, yet they do them anyway. Morrison had never really thought about it that way, but Zekai's observations made him consider human behavior from an outside perspective. I guess we just figure that if someone needs help, you help them. It doesn't matter if they're family or strangers. If you can make someone's life a little easier, why wouldn't you? That attitude is extremely rare in the galaxy, Zekai said seriously. Most species are more careful about extending trust and assistance to outsiders. They have been hurt too many times by those who would take advantage of kindness. The conversation was interrupted by Amy Chen's voice over the intercom system. Captain Morrison, please report to the communications center. We're receiving a priority signal from Valanian space. Morrison and Zekai hurried to the communications room, where Amy was working frantically at her console. The main screen showed a complex transmission that was clearly not of human origin. Mathematical sequences and pictographs scrolled past, at high speed, accompanied by what sounded like the same musical language that Zekai spoke. It's a rescue fleet, Zekai explained as he listened to the transmission. Admiral Thies is commanding 3 ships, including my people's fastest cruiser. They received the distress signal from my ship's emergency beacon before it failed. They have been searching for survivors for the past week. Amy looked worried as she monitored the incoming messages. Captain, they're demanding to know who we are and why we have one of their people aboard our ship. The tone doesn't sound very friendly. Morrison studied the tactical display that showed 3 ships approaching at high speed. They were still several hours away, but their energy signatures indicated advanced technology far beyond human capabilities. Can you translate our response, Commander? Zekai nodded and began speaking in his own language, with Amy recording and transmitting his words. He explained the situation to his people, describing how the human ship had found him drifting in space and rescued him from certain death. He praised the kindness and hospitality he had received from the crew. The response from Admiral Thies was swift and harsh. Even without understanding the words, Morrison could hear the anger in her voice as she spoke to Zekai. The alien's expression grew troubled as he listened to his superior's commands. She is not pleased, Zekai said quietly. Admiral Thies believes that I have violated first contact protocols by revealing information about our civilization to an unclassified species. She demands that you surrender me immediately and submit to interrogation about what you have learned. Morrison felt his jaw tighten with anger. Surrender you? You're not our prisoner. You're our guest. If you want to go with your people, that's your choice. But we're not surrendering anyone to threats. Chief Engineer Pete Sullivan had joined them in the communications room, and he was studying the sensor readings from the approaching ships. Captain, those vessels are armed with weapons I can't even identify. Their power output is 10 times what our ship can generate. If they want to take Commander Zekai by force, there's not much we can do to stop them. Amy continued monitoring the transmissions, her face pale with worry. They're also demanding complete records of all our conversations with the commander. They want to know everything about human technology, military capabilities, and colony locations. Morrison looked at Zekai, who seemed caught between loyalty to his own people and gratitude to his human rescuers. "What do you think we should do, Commander?" Zekai was quiet for a long moment, clearly struggling with a difficult decision. Finally, he stood up and activated the communication system, speaking directly to Admiral Thias in his own language. His voice was calm but firm, and Morrison could hear the authority of command in his tone despite not understanding the words. The response from the Valanian fleet was immediate and angry. Admiral Thias spoke rapidly, her voice rising with each sentence. Other voices joined the conversation, apparently other officers expressing their opinions about the situation. "I have invoked the right of testimony," Zekai explained to the humans. "It is an ancient law that allows any Valanian to demand a fair hearing before being punished or disciplined. I have told them that you saved my life when death was certain, and that you have treated me with honor and respect throughout my time aboard your ship." Amy looked puzzled. "What does that mean for us?" "It means they cannot simply take me away, or threaten you without holding a formal tribunal," Zekai replied. "They must listen to testimony from all parties involved, including evidence of your character and intentions. It will buy us time to present our case properly." Morrison felt a mixture of relief and apprehension. "How long do these tribunals usually take?" "It depends on the complexity of the case," Zekai said. "But given that this involves first contact with a new species, it could take days or even weeks, and the proceedings will be observed by representatives from other species in our galactic community. This will be humanity's first formal introduction to the wider galaxy." Pete Sullivan whistled low under his breath. "No pressure there." Zekai turned to face Morrison, his large dark eyes serious and thoughtful. "Captain, I must warn you about something important. My people belong to what you might call a galactic federation. Hundreds of species are connected through trade agreements, mutual defense pacts, and communication networks. We have established procedures for evaluating new species before they are allowed to join our community. And," Morrison prompted, "humanity was already under observation." Zekai continued, "Your species was scheduled for formal evaluation in approximately 50 of your years. The Galactic Council moves very slowly and carefully when considering new members. Most species require centuries of study before contact is approved." Morrison felt a chill run down his spine. "But we've already made contact with you." "Exactly," Zekai nodded. "This situation has accelerated the timeline significantly. Instead of being observed from a distance for decades, humanity will now be judged based on your actions during this crisis. How you handle the next few days will determine whether your species is welcomed into the galactic community or declared too dangerous for contact." Amy looked frightened. "What if we fail their test?" Zekai's expression was grave. "Then humanity will be quarantined to your current territory and forbidden from further expansion. Any human ships that venture beyond your established borders will be turned away or destroyed. Your species will be cut off from the rest of the galaxy permanently." The 3 Valanian ships appeared on the New Horizons main view screen like silver daggers cutting through the darkness of space. Admiral Thias commanded the lead vessel, a sleek cruiser called the Cosmic Dawn that was twice the size of the human cargo ship. The other 2 ships flanked it in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming with advanced armor and weapons systems that made the New Horizon look like a child's toy by comparison. Captain Morrison stood on his bridge, watching the alien fleet take positions around his ship. His crew worked quietly at their stations, trying to maintain normal operations despite the tension that filled the air. Everyone knew that they were completely outgunned and outnumbered. If the Valanians decided to take Commander Zekai by force, there would be nothing the humans could do to stop them. "They're hailing us," reported Communications Officer Amy Chen from her station. "Admiral Thias wants to speak directly with you, Captain." Morrison straightened his uniform and nodded. "Put her through." The main screen shifted to show the interior of the Valanian flagship's bridge. Admiral Thias was an imposing figure, taller than Zekai, and wearing an elaborate uniform covered with medals and rank insignia. Her pale blue skin had darker markings around her eyes and forehead, suggesting either natural coloration or ceremonial decoration. When she spoke, her voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "I am Admiral Thias of the Valanian Defense Fleet," she announced, her words translated by the communication system that Amy had been working on with Zekhai. "You are holding one of our officers aboard your primitive vessel. You will transfer him to our custody immediately and submit to questioning about your illegal contact with our technology." Morrison felt his anger rising at the Admiral's tone, but he kept his voice calm and professional. "Admiral, Commander Zekhai is not being held against his will. He is our guest, and he is free to leave whenever he chooses. We rescued him from a damaged escape pod and have treated him with respect and courtesy." "Your intentions are irrelevant," Thias replied coldly. "You have violated established protocols for first contact with galactic species. Your crude attempts at communication could have compromised sensitive information about our civilization. You will be detained for interrogation, and your ship will be searched." Before Morrison could respond, Zekhai stepped into view of the camera. He spoke rapidly in his own language, his voice firm and clear. Morrison could not understand the words, but the tone suggested that Zekhai was defending the human crew. Admiral Thias listened with growing displeasure, her expression becoming darker with each sentence. When Zekhai finished speaking, Thias was silent for several long moments. Finally, she spoke again, her voice tight with controlled anger. "Commander Zekhai has invoked the right of testimony under Article 7 of our contact protocols. This is highly irregular, but the law must be followed. We will convene a formal tribunal to evaluate this situation." Morrison felt a small surge of relief, but Thias was not finished. "However, you should understand that this tribunal will not simply determine the fate of your ship and crew. It will serve as humanity's formal evaluation for potential membership in the galactic community. Every word you speak and every action you take will be judged by representatives from dozens of species." The screen showed 2 additional ships emerging from faster-than-light travel nearby. These vessels were even larger than the Valanian ships, with completely different designs that suggested they belonged to other alien species. Morrison realized that word of this first contact situation had spread quickly through the galactic community. "The tribunal will convene aboard my flagship in 6 hours, Thias continued. "You will transport yourself and your senior officers to the Cosmic Dawn for questioning. Any attempt to flee or resist will be considered an act of aggression against the galactic community." The transmission ended, leaving Morrison's bridge in uncomfortable silence. Chief Engineer Pete Sullivan was the first to speak, his voice grim. "Captain, those new ships are scanning us with some kind of advanced sensor array. They're getting detailed readings of our technology, our weapons, everything." Navigation Officer Lisa Parks looked up from her console with worry written across her face. "What if this is all a trap? What if they plan to capture us regardless of what happens at this tribunal?" Morrison turned to Zekhai, who had remained quiet during the exchange with Admiral Thias. "Commander, what can you tell us about these proceedings? What should we expect?" Zekhai moved to the tactical display and pointed at the various ships surrounding them. "The tribunal will include judges from 7 different species. They will evaluate humanity based on your actions, your technology, your social structure, and your potential impact on galactic stability. The process is designed to be fair, but it is also very thorough." "And if we fail?" Morrison asked. "Then, humanity will be classified as a restricted species," Zekhai replied sadly. "Your ships will be forbidden from traveling beyond your current territory. Any attempts to expand further into the galaxy will be met with force. Your people will be isolated from the galactic community permanently." Amy Chen had been monitoring the communications traffic between the alien ships, and she looked troubled. "Captain, I'm picking up discussions about humanity's military capabilities and expansion rate. Some of these species seem very concerned about how quickly we've spread across multiple star systems." Dr. Elena Martinez joined them on the bridge, having heard about the tribunal through the ship's communication system. "What exactly are they going to ask us? How are we supposed to prove that humanity deserves to join their community?" Zekhai considered the question carefully. "They will want to know about your history, your values, your treatment of other species. They will be particularly interested in how humans handle conflict and whether you can be trusted with advanced technology. Many species in the galaxy have had bad experiences with aggressive newcomers. Morrison nodded grimly. They're worried that we might be warlike or expansionist. Exactly, Zekai confirmed. Humans have achieved interstellar travel very quickly compared to most species. You have established colonies on many worlds in a short time period. From the outside, this could appear threatening to established civilizations. They need to determine whether humanity will be a positive addition to the galactic community or a potential danger. Pete Sullivan scratched his head thoughtfully. But we haven't attacked anyone or started any wars with alien species. We've barely met any aliens before now. That is true, Zekai agreed. But they will also look at your internal history, how humans treat each other, how you resolve conflicts on your own worlds, how you manage resources and territory. These things indicate how you might behave toward other species in the future. Morrison felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders. The fate of the entire human race now depended on how well he and his crew could represent their species to a panel of alien judges. They were just a cargo ship crew, not diplomats or politicians. How could they possibly speak for all of humanity? There is one thing in your favor, Zekai added, seeming to sense Morrison's doubts. The fact that you rescued me without any expectation of reward shows that humans are capable of compassion toward strangers. This is actually quite rare in the galaxy. Most species are more cautious about helping unknown aliens. Dr. Martinez looked puzzled. Rare. But wouldn't any civilized species help someone in distress? You would think so, Zekai replied. But most species have learned to be suspicious of outsiders. They have been attacked or betrayed too many times to trust easily. The fact that you risked your ship and crew to save someone you had never met before suggests that humans have maintained their compassion despite your rapid technological advancement. Morrison began to understand what they would need to emphasize during the tribunal. So we need to show them that humans are not a threat, that we can be trusted to act responsibly in the galaxy. More than that, Zekai said, you need to show them that humanity can contribute something positive to the galactic community. What unique qualities do humans possess that would benefit other species? What can you offer that no one else can provide? The bridge crew fell silent as they considered this challenge. Morrison looked around at his officers, seeing dedicated professionals who had risked everything to save a stranger in distress. These people represented the best of humanity, their courage, their compassion, their willingness to help others regardless of the personal cost. We'll tell them the truth, Morrison decided. We'll show them who we really are and let them judge for themselves. If that's not good enough, then maybe we don't belong in their galactic community anyway. Zekai smiled for the first time since the Valanian fleet had arrived. That attitude may be exactly what they need to hear, Captain. Honesty and integrity are highly valued by the tribunal judges. If you speak from the heart about human values and motivations, you may find that you have more supporters than you realize. The next 6 hours would determine whether humanity joined the galaxy as equals or remained forever isolated among the stars. Morrison began preparing for the most important conversation in human history. The tribunal chamber aboard the Cosmic Dawn was unlike anything Captain Morrison had ever seen. The room was circular with a high ceiling that seemed to stretch upward into darkness. 7 raised platforms surrounded a central speaking area, each one occupied by representatives from different alien species. Their forms varied wildly from humanoid to completely alien, but all of them watched the proceedings with obvious intelligence and interest. Admiral Thyes sat at the highest platform, her pale blue skin almost glowing under the chamber's lights. To her left was a creature that looked like a giant insect, its multiple eyes reflecting the room's illumination. On her right sat a being covered in thick fur with large ears that twitched constantly. The other judges were equally diverse, representing species that had achieved space travel long before humans had even discovered fire. Morrison stood in the center of the chamber with his senior officers, Pete Sullivan, Amy Chen, and Dr. Martinez. Commander Zekai stood nearby, serving as both witness and translator. The weight of representing all humanity pressed down on Morrison's shoulders as he faced the alien judges who would determine his species' future among the stars. "The tribunal will now begin," Admiral Theus announced, her voice echoing through the chamber. "We are here to evaluate the species known as humans for potential membership in the galactic community. The circumstances of this evaluation are unusual, as first contact occurred during a rescue operation rather than through normal diplomatic channels." The insect-like judge spoke next, its voice translated by the chamber's advanced systems. "I am Counselor Clix of the Zephyrian Collective. We wish to understand human motivations for interstellar expansion. Your species has established colonies on 23 worlds in only 60 years. This rate of growth is unprecedented and potentially concerning." Morrison took a deep breath before responding. "Counselor Clix, humans explore space for the same reasons we once explored our own planet. We're curious about what's out there and we want to build better lives for our families. We establish colonies to provide opportunities for our people and to ensure our species can survive if something happens to Earth." A tall, thin being with silver skin leaned forward from another platform. "I am Judge Velthara of the ancient Cruxan Empire. Your expansion has been remarkably rapid. How can we be certain that humans will not become aggressive toward established species as you continue to grow?" Dr. Martinez stepped forward to answer. "Your Honor, humans have a long history of both conflict and cooperation. We've learned from our mistakes on Earth, and we've established strong ethical guidelines for our space colonies. We believe in peaceful coexistence and mutual benefit through trade and cultural exchange." The furry creature with large ears spoke, in a voice that sounded like musical tones. "I am Elder Bricks of the Harmony Worlds. We are curious about human social structures. How do you resolve conflicts within your own species?" Pete Sullivan answered this question, his practical engineer's perspective coming through clearly. "Elder Bricks, humans have developed systems of law and government that help us settle disputes without violence. We have international organizations that work to prevent wars and protect people's rights. We're not perfect, but we keep trying to do better." The questions continued for over an hour, covering everything from human technology and military capabilities to philosophy and art. The judges seemed particularly interested in humanity's treatment of other species, though they were careful not to reveal too much about galactic politics or potential conflicts. Morrison answered each question as honestly as possible, acknowledging human flaws while highlighting their positive qualities. He spoke about humanity's capacity for compassion, their willingness to help strangers in need, and their dedication to learning and improvement. His crew supported him with specific examples and technical details when needed. Then Counselor Clix asked the question that Morrison had been dreading. "Captain Morrison, your species has a documented history of warfare and violence. How can we trust that humans will not bring these same destructive tendencies to interstellar relations?" Morrison was quiet for a moment, considering how to respond to such a direct challenge. Finally, he looked up at the alien judges and spoke from his heart. "Counselor, you're right that humans have fought wars and caused suffering. We've made terrible mistakes in our past, and some humans continue to make bad choices today. But we've also shown that we can change and grow." He gestured toward his crew. "The people standing with me represent the best of humanity. They risked their lives to save Commander Zekai even though he was a complete stranger from an unknown species. They didn't ask for payment or recognition. They helped because it was the right thing to do." Morrison's voice grew stronger as he continued. "That's what humans do when we're at our best. We help people who need help. We protect those who can't protect themselves, and we share what we have with others. Yes, we've fought wars, but we've also built hospitals and schools. We've created art and music that brings joy to people's lives. We've explored dangerous places to expand the boundaries of knowledge." Before any of the judges could respond, a new voice rang out from the chamber's observation gallery. "Permission to speak, Your Honors?" Morrison turned to see a being he didn't recognize standing up in the viewing area. The creature had green skin and 4 arms and wore what appeared to be a merchant's clothing. Admiral Theus looked annoyed by the interruption, but she nodded permission for the being to continue. "I am Captain Gorix of the Tyrellian Trade Guild. the four-armed alien announced. 6 months ago, my convoy was attacked by pirates in the outer spiral. My ships were damaged and my crew was wounded. A human cargo vessel responded to our distress call and fought off the attackers. They asked for nothing in return except safe passage through our territory. Morrison was surprised to hear this testimony, but more beings were standing up in the gallery. A tall, elegant creature with scales instead of skin spoke next. I am Dr. Senna of the Ashkari Medical Institute. When plague struck our colony on New Ashkar, human medical teams volunteered to help treat our people. They brought supplies and expertise, working alongside our doctors to develop a cure. Many of my people would have died without their assistance. One by one, representatives from different species began sharing stories about their encounters with humans. A mining engineer whose crew had been rescued from a collapsed asteroid facility. A scientific expedition that had been saved from a solar storm by human ships. Diplomatic missions that had been protected by human security forces during dangerous negotiations. The testimonies continued for nearly 2 hours. Each story painted the same picture of humans who acted with courage and compassion when others needed help. They were stories of a species that didn't just survive in the galaxy, but actively worked to make it a better place for everyone. Admiral Thyes finally called for order in the chamber. The tribunal has heard enough testimony. We will now deliberate on humanity's application for galactic citizenship. The judges spoke among themselves in their various languages for what seemed like an eternity. Morrison and his crew waited nervously, knowing that the future of their entire species hung in the balance. Commander Zekhai stood beside them, his expression hopeful but uncertain. Finally, Admiral Thyes stood up and addressed the chamber. The Galactic Council has reached a unanimous decision. Based on the evidence presented today, including both the testimony of Captain Morrison's crew and the witness accounts from multiple species, we hereby grant full membership status to the human species. The chamber erupted in sounds of approval from the gallery. Morrison felt his knees go weak with relief as the weight of responsibility finally lifted from his shoulders. They had done it. Humanity had passed the test, but Admiral Thyes was not finished speaking. Furthermore, the Council wishes to formally apologize for our initial hostile approach to this situation. Commander Zekhai's rescue and the testimony we have heard today prove that humanity represents the highest ideals of galactic citizenship. We welcome humans as equal partners in our community. As celebrations began throughout the chamber, Morrison felt a hand on his shoulder. Commander Zekhai stood beside him, his alien features arranged in an expression of deep satisfaction. Welcome to the galactic community, Captain, Zekhai said, though I believe you have been ready for this moment far longer than any of us realized. Morrison smiled, looking out at the assembled representatives of hundreds of worlds. Thank you, Commander, and it all started because we couldn't leave someone alone in the void. In the weeks that followed, human ships began appearing throughout the galaxy, not as conquerors but as helpers and protectors. They established trade relationships, shared medical knowledge, and continued their pattern of arriving wherever assistance was needed most. The galaxy had gained more than just a new member species. It had gained its conscience. And in every human ship that traveled between the stars, emergency rescue equipment became standard. Because humans had learned that space was vast and dangerous, and sometimes people needed help from strangers who were willing to risk everything to save a life. That was what humans did best, and it was what made them valuable citizens of the galaxy.